And we begin this week's news update with Sprott Physical Silver Trust updating its investors on the delivery status of its silver bullion purchases. As of November 10th, 2010, the trust had contracted to purchase a total of 22.3 million ounces of silver bullion. As of December 31st, 2010, a total of 20.9 million ounces of silver bullion had been delivered to the trust. Sprott gave a follow-up update saying they successfully received physical delivery of its remaining silver bars on January 12, 2010, thus completing the delivery of the trust's silver purchased in November 2010. This means in total it took over 2 months for their entire silver order to be delivered. Just imagine with Sprott having as much money as he does and it taking that long to get to him, how long is it going to take for the little guys to get their orders, especially when a true shortage occurs? On the US Mint website, we can see that silver sales so far in January 2011 have been over 4.6 million ounces of silver. This is a new monthly record. Rising Chinese inflation to show up in US imports. When garment buyers from New York show up next month at China's annual trade show to bargain over next autumn's fashions, many will face sticker shock. Inflation has arrived in China, and after Tuesday's release of crucial financial statistics by China's central bank, few economists expect Beijing officials to be able to tame rising prices anytime soon. In China, there is little question that the Consumer Price Index understates the true extent of inflation. The Chinese Consumer Price Index includes apartment rents, but excludes soaring costs for owner-occupied housing, and it is based heavily on prices of an outdated list of consumer products that are no longer popular. An economist at the Beijing Institute of Technology said that a more accurate gauge of inflation would show consumer price rising 10% a year. The National Bureau of Statistics has said it is actively studying ways to improve the Consumer Price Index. As an aside, it's very important to point out that the media acknowledges how China's CPI understates inflation, but the New York Times or anybody else in the mainstream media for that matter never talk about how the US CPI understates inflation. Because of geometric weighting and hedonics, real year-over-year US CPI growth last month was not 1.5% like reported. NIA estimates real U.S. price inflation to currently be somewhere around 5%, meaning inflation is already well above the Fed's 2% target. And if they want to stop inflation, the Fed needs to begin rapidly raising interest rates immediately. Public strongly opposes debt ceiling increase. The U.S. public overwhelmingly opposes raising the country's debt limit, even though failure to do so could hurt America's international standing and push up borrowing costs. Some 71% of those surveyed oppose increasing the borrowing authority, the focus of a brewing political battle over federal spending. Only 18% support an increase. The poll underscores the current task ahead for U.S. lawmakers as the debt nears its current ceiling of $14.3 trillion. As a reminder, Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner last week warned that its failure to raise the borrowing limit in the coming months could lead to catastrophic economic consequences. Riddle me this, Mr. Geithner, if we are in such a recovery, how could we be so close to catastrophic economic consequences unless we keep borrowing? And for those of you out there who don't think that we're going to increase the debt ceiling, let me just say that not if they raise the debt ceiling, but when they raise the debt ceiling. They will be acting directly against the wishes of the people who put them in office. U.S. initial jobless claims rise to 445,000. The number of first-time claims for unemployment insurance payments jumped in the first week of 2011 to the highest level since October, as more Americans lined up to file following the holidays. We're taking steps in the right direction, though it's not enough to move the unemployment rate down precipitously. Indeed, it's not. In 2010, 2.9 million properties received foreclosure filings, an increase of 2% from 2009 and 23% from 2008. The figures would have been worse if not for a surprising decrease in foreclosures towards the end of 2010. This just goes to show you more proof that the USA is number one. Gold imports by India, the biggest bullion consumer, likely reached a record last year driven by investment demand, according to the World Gold Council. Purchases were about 800 metric tons compared with 550 tons in 2009. Imports at that level would be the highest for India in its history. Demand for bullion as investment in India surged 73% in the year ended September 30th, according to the World Gold Council data. Purchases by the Asian country this year will remain strong. Price is no longer a factor. While jewelry is a form in which a lot of consumers do buy in India, the core position really is security for the future, which is the investment angle for buying into gold. And it's always nice to hear an update from our friend Goldman Sachs. Goldman sees US dollar falling versus Canadian dollar in 2011. The US dollar is likely to continue its slide against its Canadian rival, Goldman Sachs said Wednesday.
The loonie leaped over the American greenback briefly today and finished trading virtually on par with its US cousin. But economists say it has little to do with Canada.
The American dollar is falling against 16 other currencies. Right? They're almost at parity with the Australian dollar, which is the first time in an extremely long time that's happened.
Goldman said the US dollar will decline to 95 cents by the end of 2011. It had previously forecast that the pair would hover near parity. And as Goldman sees the dollar falling, food prices set to rise after US cuts crop stock forecasts. Fears of a steep rise in food prices have increased after the U.S. government cut its forecast for stocks of key crops, including corn. Corn surged to an almost 30-month high in morning trading after the U.S. government cut forecasts for domestic inventories, tightening global food supplies after adverse weather slashed harvests. It's also interesting to note here that the mainstream media is always blaming the weather for rising food prices no matter what, and ignore the monetary inflation that's happening all around the world. The price of wheat also climbed. U.S. stockpiles will be extraordinarily tight. The Standard & Poor's Agricultural Index, which tracks 8 futures, has surged 70% since the end of June as drought in Russia and excessive rains in Canada and Pakistan curbed harvests. Cattle futures yesterday climbed to a record, and coffee rose to a 13-year high. Downturn's ugly trademark, steep, lasting drop in wages. In California, former auto worker Maria Gregg was out of work 5 months last year before landing a new job at a nearly 20% pay cut. In Massachusetts, Kevin Cronin, who lost his $150,000 a year job as a money manager in early 2009, is now frothing cappuccinos at Starbucks for $8.85 an hour. In Wisconsin, Dale Szabo, a former manufacturing manager with 2 master's degrees, has been searching years for a job comparable to the one he lost in 2003. He's now a school janitor. They are among the lucky. There are 14.5 million people on the unemployment rolls, including 6.4 million who have been jobless for more than 6 months. It's important here to actually note that so many of the employed have taken on large wage cuts or switched to jobs paying half the pay from their old jobs, but they are still considered employed and don't show up in any of the unemployment numbers.